Hey there, and welcome back to the B2B Marketing Asia podcast. I'm your host, Joe Escobedo, and today we'll be talking about how one enterprise tech organization generated over $60 million in new business over 3 years. Yes, you heard me correctly. That is $60 million. And to help provide some clarity around that initiative, the brainchild behind it, I'd like to introduce demand generation strategist, Vinnie Romano, to the show. Vinnie, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of people are going to be wondering, how did you actually achieve that? And we'll get to that at the end of the episode. But first, I'd love to hear about what are some of the challenges you were trying to address with this initiative?
Well, so the original brief was actually a brief that no one in the organization wanted to touch. It was very low profile because it was focused more on the B2B side of things. So as opposed to your B2C, big, juicy, high profile budgets, there wasn't much budget in the marketing department to do anything with this thing, with this brief, with this initiative. So there was an unstructured sort of situation when the brief was kicking around, and we sort of threw our hands up to say, we'll take that. We'll make something work. We'll see what we can do with it. And so the initiative was to effectively, how do we get in front of more of our audience, more of the time, having better quality conversations and creating better qualified leads from marketing to sales, so that our sales teams can close a lot more effectively, but meet the prospects at an earlier stage of the buying cycle, at a time of learning and discovery. So do you want me to expand? Do you want me to keep going?
No, I think that's good. I think just to recap the points you mentioned.
Because I can keep talking.
Yeah.
You need to stop me.
Absolutely. No, so when you're talking about, I feel, a lot because we focus on B2B marketing, and you talked about kind of B2B marketing maybe having a lower profile versus B2C. And I think a lot of folks who are listening or watching now can probably relate to that, that kind of point of view. And you mentioned some of the goals were obviously getting better qualified leads, closing more sales. I think anyone in B2B can relate to that in terms of the challenges, opportunities. I guess the question is, what was the idea that brought it together? I know this was a long-term initiative over 3 years, but if you could take us through the big idea, just so we can wrap our heads around that first off.
Yeah, sure. Look, so it didn't start off as a big idea. As I say, it was this brief that no one really wanted to touch. The budget wasn't there. Sales guys in the team, they had a marketing team and a sales team, obviously. And the sales team were going rogue. There wasn't really much structure with regards to what they were doing. The CRMs and marketing automation platforms were, working in silo. Teams weren't talking with each other. No one was sort of clear on the KPIs across sales, marketing to, the entire that part of the organization. And so I was very fortunate to be working with one of the greatest minds at client end, with one of the greatest minds that I've ever come across, to be working, to have the pleasure of working with her on this initiative. And it was through her sheer drive and determination, that and our great relationship, which, by the way, blossomed through this project, which sort of then saw this project going from, well, this was over here, but now this has become one of the biggest initiatives that this organization ended up, not just implementing and keeping running for 3 years, but being shortlisted for awards at Umbrella Asia, for getting so much press behind it and enabling, sales and marketing executives within this organization to increase their thought leadership, their brand profile, and actually moving a number of those executives into the top 20 influencer list of LinkedIn over the course of those 3 years. And as a result, it got so much attention globally within the organization, because this was really just focused on APAC, but it got so much attention that the client that I was working with on client end was being tapped by LinkedIn and other people within the organization. Other organizations were wanting to find out how we did this, and I was happy to take the back seat on that fame. It was a big collaborative effort, and as I say, I still hold very, very high regard for that client in question. I'm not naming any names.
Absolutely. So I think those are some tremendous achievements.
That's actually how I met you, though, 2-3 years ago in Singapore, right? So it was me and the client, and she introduced me to you, and we met. We met at the Umbrella? You were running a couple of workshops there, weren't you? Yeah.
Yes. So I was doing a workshop at the Umbrella event. We met there. And subsequently, that client and I worked together. Once again, I won't name the organization because I'll connect the dots. But we ended up working in the same organization, I think, a couple years later. So yes, it is funny how everything comes together over a series of time. And so, yes, absolutely. Like I said, some tremendous results. I'm sure a lot of people are kind of salivating it. They would love to get similar results. I guess the question they're also wondering is, how did you actually do this? This is a 3-year initiative. Break it down for us. Take us through kind of the phases in this initiative. How did you actually start it?
Sure. So again, I'll reiterate that it didn't originally start off as a long-term perspective, but the thinking was because it was B2B. Obviously, the difference between B2B and B2C is that B2B sales cycles are a lot longer, cost of sales are higher, impulse purchases are rare. There's generally, not an individual, not one person that you've got to convince or sell to. It's normally a buying committee. And in B2B, decisions are made with logic rather than emotion. And so it was quite fitting that we needed to take a long-term strategy, because this wasn't going to happen overnight. So some of the things that we employed as the agency that was working on this was, we had to get in front of the decision makers at the organization, both in front of sales and marketing. We had to understand what marketing was going for and what sales were going for. And remember, as I said at the beginning of this brief was really low profile, so no one really wanted to touch it. But the sales guys saw money, so they were going after it, and good luck to them, and kudos to them, right? They were chasing what they could, alongside other things that were happening, by the way. Don't let me create a mirage that this was the only thing that was happening in this organization. But yeah, marketing didn't really want to touch it, no budget for it. So what we had to understand first was, okay, well, by helping, coaching, and advising the marketing team that marketing is there to aid the sales process, and helping and coaching and advising the sales guys the importance of marketing in order to generate more sales, but more specifically, how to get the sales guys in front of their prospects at an earlier time of learning and discovery, but bringing them to the forefront and automating 75% of that sales process. So bringing leads in, looking at the current leads that they had that they could sell to, but bringing leads in, creating an abundance of pipeline, automating 75% of that starting process, whereby you would set up effective lead scoring strategies, so as to have the salespeople as the face of the campaign, automated through from stranger to prospect to marketing qualified lead through the sales cycle, to which point, once the prospect turned into a marketing qualified lead, that salesperson that was responsible for that particular prospect, dependent on region, would then get a notification saying, this person has just ticked over into marketing qualified lead status. It's now time for you to pick up the phone and work your magic, sort of vibe, right? But the beauty of that process and it being automated and having the right CRM and marketing automation tools plugged in, working alongside their legacy systems, trying to understand what we can get rid of and plug in and save costs and increase efficiency. By having those things in place, you ultimately, at the time at which a prospect meets marketing qualified lead status, the salesperson not only has that raft of information of what that prospect has done, engaged with, downloaded, listened to, where they came from, what social media post, what region are they in, all that kind of stuff, so as to enable a better quality conversation. But in order to decrease the level of cold outreach that would do, the person at the other end of the phone had a higher chance of knowing who that person was when they picked up the phone, because they will have already been exposed to the name, the company, the understanding, the content, the quality of the content, right? So it makes for a very good, marriage between all those elements, because ultimately what you're doing is that you are scaling the process in an automated fashion using tech, but humanizing where you can. So automate where you can, but humanize where you must, right? And being able to pick up the phone and have those good quality conversations just led to more business more of the time.
Absolutely. You bring up a very good point. I have two questions off the back of that. One of which was, you talked about, the sales was hungry to get this because they obviously saw the value in it. Marketing didn't really maybe see it initially. I'd love to get your thoughts on, you talk about coaching, but how did you even get marketing to buy in first off? And then the second question off the back of that is around, sounds like marketing automation, lead scoring are definitely one of the key factors. The question is, what are some of the key learnings from that experience when it comes to marketing automation and lead scoring? Well, maybe we'll start with the marketing question first. How did you get marketing on board with this entire initiative?
Yeah, well, first, so why we threw our hands up for this brief was because at the time we were a small agency. We were eager and keen to pick up any business, really. But on top of that, we also saw, a really, really good opportunity. And because we were a content marketing automation agency, we perhaps were able to spot, and we specialize in that because the marketers, they've got 1,000,001 things to do, and we're only in this 1/1,000,000th of a space, right? So we were really deep into it, and we got really excited about it because we saw the potential. And so it was really just an education piece around, this is where you are, this is what you want, these are the dots and how to connect it so that we can make it happen. And that's not to say that the marketing team were not knowledgeable. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that because of priorities and because they have had 1,000,001 other things to do, it was very low on the priority list. But but then that's the job of an agency, is to identify those opportunities and pitch for them, to which we did. And we were very fortunate that we were paired up with the team in the marketing. So, the marketers that we were, pitching to could see it. And so does that answer the question?
Yes, absolutely. I think it goes back to the point about how do you connect the dots where we are now to where we want to be, and then the dots to connect those. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And again, we were specialists and partners with the likes of, Salesforce, Oracle, Marketo, which is now owned by Adobe. And we were using HubSpot ourselves as a small to medium-sized business. So we were doing it ourselves in a similar sort of way. But we certainly learned a lot from that project, because there were things that we did not know that were going to happen, and obstacles that we needed to overcome ourselves. So not only was it a great success for the client, but it was a great learning curve for us. And we implemented that same strategy into our own strategy. All the things that worked, we took all the good bits, right, and the relevant bits, and implemented it into ours, which then meant that, you know, we were then seeing more business as an agency as a result.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear more about some of those good bits. You don't have to disclose everything, but what are some of the good bits that you learned that folks listening can hopefully apply to their business?
Yeah. Well, when I say good bits, what I mean is, you know, you try and you test, you trial and you error, right? And so by trialing and erroring in some of these, with the budget that we did have, you know, it was a situation where it opened up a lot of opportunity to try new things. And the way in which the world is constantly moving at a rapid rate, you know, there is never a silver bullet. There is never, you know, a one size fits all. And what we led with, what we directed ourselves with, was the knowledge that we had, and the things that we did know worked, best practice. And we employed a very stereotypical, you know, 80%, you know, sort of a safe bet sort of strategy, and 20% of that was used for testing. So when you ask me what the good bits were, it's quite simply the things that worked, and that we saw great results for. But again, that's completely dependent on the client brief or what it is that we're trying to achieve. But those things, those really juicy things that we do know work, is that, you know, I have some stats just written here. I just want to make sure I get the percentages right. But 72% of B2B buyers use social media to research solutions to their business challenges, specifically LinkedIn and Google. So buyers are no longer waiting by the phone. And in fact, cold calling is, even though it's still a viable tactic, it's not scalable. It takes up a lot of time, and the results that come off the back of a cold call or cold outreach just don't stack up. Now, that's not to say that cold calling does not work. It does, but there's a lot of effort that has to go into that with not too much of a return. So we had to try and find a way as to how to turn that into a scalable model, and automate where we can. So that was something that we employed, and we see that it worked and works still, especially with the way that the world is now as well. You know, people are less and less interested in waiting by the phone, you know, for information from a salesperson who's going to be selling them their hopes and their dreams. 90% of that research is now at the ability at the end of the fingertips to go, okay, well, I have a challenge. What's my solution? I'm going to go online and find it. And then the other thing that we knew was that 92% of B2B buyers engage with sales professionals who are known industry thought leaders. In other words, people would rather buy from a person than a brand. So in both regards, you need a solution to rank higher. And that's by creating an abundance of good quality content, due to the fact that Google and socials are making it trickier for business to be seen, as they have and always have done, but even more so today, constantly, you know, pushing the envelope for customer centricity, a customer centric mindset, and a big focus on excellent customer experience. But then on the other side to that as well, it's the solution to build more trust. So bringing your salespeople to the forefront of your marketing and implementing a social selling program, combined with your marketing automation platform and your CRM, combined with your team growth mindset, combined with your consistent brand narrative and the things that you are talking about, injecting the values, the authentic values of your people, and getting those people at the forefront, creating that abundance of content, which will sit in the sphere and meet your customers, meet your prospects at a time of learning and discovery. In some cases, even before they even know the question that they want to ask themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think those are great stats. And you mentioned kind of one practical tip, which is, you know, having your salespeople be the face. I think some organizations have implemented that since. I'd love to hear about what are some of the other practical takeaways, because I think people listening or watching will really want to know, okay, it sounds like tremendous results. The question is, how do we implement this Any key learnings in terms of practical things that they can implement maybe today or this week or this month, I think they would love to hear.
Yeah. So the first one is you need good communication internally. You need to be communicating across sales, marketing, and communicating with the business leader, the CEO or the managing director. The managing director or the CEO, 80% of the time comes from a sales background. They have pressures put on them from the shareholders, the stakeholders, in order to, okay, great, the marketing's great, but where's my return? And so marketing needs to understand that they are there to aid the sales process. So if the marketing team can do the job of bringing their sales team to the forefront and actually creating a social selling program for themselves, but also putting the salespeople at the forefront. And a practical tip that I employ all the time is that as a salesperson, you want to have that content ready to go in unison with the rest of your team. So let's say you've got 10 salespeople in your team, right? And you are creating a big blockbuster piece of downloadable content, which is sat on a landing page, which you're driving traffic to through an organic and a paid social media strategy. You can do the paid pieces through your brand channels, but the organic piece and leveraging your network specifically through LinkedIn, you can do that by setting this social selling program, but further on top of that, get the marketing team to create the content off the back of that big content piece in the tone of voice of each individual salesperson. Actually get the content that you want in that social media post. Make sure you know what times of day and what days are best to be posting, so you can optimize your reach on the likes of LinkedIn, for example, and place those posts into the salesperson's calendar with exactly the right content, with consistent hashtags that you want to own the areas in, with downloads to the long form article that it links to, and that long form article that links to the ebook, for example, all of which is highly optimized for SEO search, all with their own individual strong call to actions to optimize that engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've run quite a lot of social selling programs for tech companies. And one challenge that I'm constantly hearing about is that, the marketing team is creating these great collaterals, but the problem is that the sales team isn't actually leveraging them. Or what they're doing is probably, I find even worse than that, is just copying and pasting a blurb that marketing has created. So I've seen this recently in some companies where they have, 20 or 30 salespeople posting the exact same thing. So for me, that's kind of a big pet peeve. And one tip that I always try to implement is working backwards before you even launch initiative. You talked about marketing and sales alignment, speaking with the sales team and helping them understand what's in it for them. Is this going to help them drive more qualified leads? Is it going to have them drive no more meetings and things like that? Because I think without that, it's difficult. And I think most people, people are very busy, so they deprioritize that. They throw something up, and then it actually has I would say, relatively detrimental impact because they're just basically copying and pasting the same thing. So that's a caveat that I would want to highlight.
Yeah, which Joe, I agree with you, is wrong. Now, posting or at least being active on LinkedIn, or at least being active in some sort of way where sales are taking marketing collateral and posting, that's better than not doing anything at all. Don't get me wrong. But if your content is just a mere copy and paste, doesn't have any of your personality, you haven't, another thing that, is very important is for the sales and marketers to pay attention to their own personal brands, right? So talking about things that are of value to them will further push that initiative when they're on the phone, when they're in front of a prospect or a customer, because it's natural, it's authentic. That's not to say that you can't merge the two. You should be merging the two together. You should be merging, the content that has been either ghost written for the salesperson, by the salesperson, right? But then sharing everyone else's content. So sales should be sharing. So salesman one should be sharing salesman two's article or content and putting their own spin on it. But it has to come from an authentic perspective. And that's when I was talking about, coaching sales and marketing teams, is that's what it is that I do, is I help them understand and connect the dots, right, to ultimately build a program like this, very much like what you do. But the fundamental difference is that salespeople and marketers are cut from two very different cloths, right? The motivations are different. And so it's about understanding those motivations and ultimately giving the salespeople exactly what it is that they need to be posting. In this particular example, if they are not the time, if they don't have time, right? But that should be the role of the marketing team.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. They should be working together to provide the best content for their audiences. Vinnie, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all your insights. It's been super, super helpful. Like I said, there's been some key learnings for me, and I think a lot of people watching and listening. If you do enjoy today's episode, please feel free to share it with those who might find value out of it. I think there's a lot of practical nuggets in here. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Joe.